Scott Grayson was at the game yesterday. He was inside the locker room. You can get all of his locker room post-game interviews. Malcolm Jenkins, Lane Johnson, Wendell Smallwood, Chris Long, and others at 97.3 ESPN.com. Let's bring Scott into the Boardwalk Honda hotline now for Grayson's grades, as the Eagles with an ugly loss yesterday. But before we get to the grades, Scott, mood in the locker room yesterday was?
I would say frustrated heavily.
Let me ask you, compare it to last week in Nashville.
Last week stunned. This week, growing frustration. If that paints a picture for you. I mean, last week they were just stunned.
Like the thought of this might be us?
I don't think they're there yet. I think that they're at the point where they're looking at themselves going, this is not us. This is us not playing up to our potential. And so that's where the frustration stems from, that they're killing themselves. They're their own worst enemy. And that until they fix those problems, they're likely going to keep losing. So short week, division opponent facing them. Certainly a lot that can be gained by coming out ahead on Thursday night, but certainly a lot to lose if not.
You wrote about the mistakes and the frustration. I mean, are they looking at themselves as a team undisciplined? I mean, the penalties, I think, are really starting to, be a factor. Now that we're seeing 5 games, that's been the trend that has been most concerning for me.
Yes, the penalties are certainly a concern, and you look at what happened with some of the penalties, and so everybody's going to point at the Michael Bennett one, and I'll be included, that says that should not have been a penalty, and it was a very costly one in that it extended the drive. That's where the Eagles defense gave up. The only touchdown that they allowed was on that drive that was extended because of that penalty. And so take that one out of the mix. But you look at the others, they're killing themselves offensively when they start to finally get a little momentum going. You get something stupid like a receiver not lined up properly. I think it was Nelson Aguilar covering up, a tight end or a receiver that he shouldn't have been covering up on the line of scrimmage. You get false starts. These things that mount and can just shoot yourself in the foot and kill you. Maybe it's a drive that you end up getting only 3 points instead of 7, or that you might end up getting none because Jai fumbles the ball away at the 5. So they're definitely killing themselves with stupid penalties, and it's those kind of things that they got to fix.
You look at, for you, offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball. I mean, I thought the defense, for the most part, was pretty good yesterday. I mean, we kept talking about leading up to this game, home and road splits defensively. I thought you saw the defense play a lot better. They held them to field goals. They got the turnover late. They got a couple stops. You take away the touchdown that the Viking defense scored, the defense really only gave up 16 points. For me, they got to find answers on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem. And, the defense, it felt like you were going, oh, here we go again, because Jalen Mills gave up another big play. But I agree with you. Defensively, 16 points at home, that's a game you should win. And offensively, they're just not getting it done. And, okay, now why is that? I think they're becoming somewhat predictable. I don't see Doug Peterson being as aggressive. We're taking, some chances occasionally. I dinged him in my grades because I quite frankly, you get that turnover that Bradham recovers.
Yeah.
You're sitting at just outside the 30. You take a shot at the end zone on that first play. You got a team on their heels. You got a crowd back into the game that was quiet for a long time. Momentum is on your side. Go for it. Take a shot at the jugular. And I think it would have broken the Vikings had they gotten that. And then you look at the 3rd and inches play. You bring in Josh Adams for the one play he was actually on offense the entire game, and you give him a carry there on a pitch out.
That was the worst call of the game.
What are you doing? And then the challenge that they took on the guy. Oh,
wow. You might have just topped. You might have just topped that call with that challenge. That challenge was awful.
So what I see is a Doug Peterson who looks tentative. He's playing not to lose as opposed to playing to win right now. And that's not the Doug Peterson that led this team a year ago. So, all these guys are saying, look in the mirror. We got to evaluate ourselves. We got to figure out what we're doing wrong individually. Doug Peterson needs to look in the mirror. He needs to figure out that he's not calling the game the same way he did a year ago. And I know people will say that's DeFilippo or Frank Reich. I think it's Doug Peterson.
Last night on the post game, Seth Joyner says he looks exhausted, tired. You were in that Peterson presser, do you get that vibe from him that he is spent, that he's wiped out 5 weeks in, that that this is an uphill battle?
It is an uphill battle. I think I see a guy who's emotionally exhausted from trying to find ways to get this team to perform. Largely, I think, okay, you take away the fact that he's calling the plays and has, in my opinion, not been calling aggressive enough. When the plays that are called, the guys are not executing. And as a coach, you sit there and you go, what more do I need to do to get these guys to perform? Ultimately, it's on them. They've got to execute the plays that are called. And that hasn't been happening. And I think for him as an offensive coach, he's at the point where you're going to start seeing him losing hair because he's going to start pulling it out over the mistakes the offensive line's making, the lack of time that Wentz has to find receivers, perhaps the fact that Wentz is just a little slow in recognizing when he's got to evacuate the pocket right now. All those things are mounting and creating problems, and I think that's what you see out of Doug Peterson. I don't know that it's a guy who is just drained from maybe a Super Bowl hangover. I think it's a guy who's just sitting there scratching his head going, what can I do to try to get these guys to perform and execute the plays I'm calling? Because right now the mistakes are taking away whatever success they're trying to find.
You gave an F to the offensive line, and, I would agree the line has been a big problem here. Is some of that because the lack of run game, that the fact that the line was very good last year because they're a good run blocking line and they're just an okay pass blocking line? You're really asking them to do something that they're just average at.
Perhaps, but here's the problem in my mind. They're not running the ball they're not even trying to run the ball. First 3 plays of the game yesterday, what were they? Pass plays. Negative yardage. They end up going -12 on their first 3 plays of the game and punting. That's not going to help you get anything going. And I think offensive linemen like to try to dictate the flow of the game up front. Let them run 1 or 2 plays off of run blocks. Give them the chance.
Well, they went play action on the second play of the game, and I'm thinking to myself, this is a team that doesn't run a lick. You're going play action. Who you fooling?
Exactly. And the Vikings aren't stupid. They understand that. So I think a lot of the problem for the offensive line, there's twofold. One, these guys want to control the line of scrimmage. You do that by running the ball and then letting the pass come off of it. And this team needs to do that. Mm-hmm. Number 2, Lane Johnson admitted it too on the missed block that he had. There's some, they're just not recognizing things right now as a unit, as an offensive line. I think their miscommunication is off. He admitted that they expected a guy to be blitzing. He wasn't blitzing, and then when they went to try to slide down the coverage, it was too late, and that's how that sack fumble occurred that was a scoop and score. So there's some miscommunication, some lack of recognition. I don't think that Seumalo was necessarily that was the right time to mix up the line at that point. But that's what they did. And ultimately, Seumalo, outside of the first couple of possessions, I think settled in. But they've got to figure things out. And it's every single one of them on that offensive line. And that's a huge domino that when that falls, timing falls, Wentz has to escape or try, and he's sacked, or there's turnovers. It's just it all starts there. They got to fix the offensive line. Once that happens, I think this offense will start clicking.
Scott Grayson. Grayson's grades are posted at 973ESPN.com. I want to get to Carson Wentz and get your thought. You gave him a C, and, we got people tweeting at me that they got to go back to Foles, and, Wentz is the problem. He's holding the ball too long. Over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns again, but overall you thought he was just average.
Well, I yes, and the stats, and I saw there were some people that were reaching out to me too. They were saying that one guy disagreed completely with my grade of a C, thought Wentz was good, and a lot of people then chimed in and said no, that was accurate because look, he got the yardage, it looks good, the 2 touchdowns over 300 yards passing, but a lot of that was dinking and dunking down the field with Ertz over the middle when that's what the Vikings were giving them because they had a 2-possession lead at the end of the game, and then he gets a touchdown to Ertz. Nice throw, late in happening. I think Wentz, to me, like I said, his mental clock, again, here's a guy who was in his 3rd game since getting hurt last December. Did not have action in training camp. He's still trying to get used to the timing of those live bullets that are coming at him again. He's going to be fine. You just got to understand that right now he's just, in my opinion, a half second off of recognizing when he needs to get out of there. And I'll admit, too, I don't know that he's got as much quickness when he's leaving the pocket as he did last year. And I think that's still some of the healing that needs to occur and trust in that knee when he takes off. So I think there's still some rust that Wentz is trying to dust off. All in all, I think he's doing pretty well, but he's got to get that mental clock back under control.
Scott, give us you got a lot of interviews posted right now on our website 973ESPN.com. What was the frustration level on the Bennett play in the locker room?
Those guys just don't know what they can do anymore on defense. I think you see a bunch of guys on defense that are going, what can we do? What's allowed? Because at this point, I mean, I thought Bennett did a really good job of letting up and not injuring Kirk Cousins. If he really wanted to, he could have swept out that leg hard, and he didn't. When his hand slid down from the waist, just above the knee to the ground, he just made sure he got the guy down, and without being overly aggressive or using too much force, which referee Walt Coleman told a pool reporter afterwards that it was the force from the shoulder into the knee is why they called the penalty.
It's awful.
I think it's crazy. These guys don't know what else they can do. Chris Long admitted he was called for something like that earlier in the season, and he's right. You get to the quarterback, you're selling out your body, and I thought Bennett was kind of pushed towards the knee by the offensive lineman, that it was a bad call. I expect the NFL to possibly even issue the Eagles an apology for that. But these guys don't know what they can do anymore on defense, and it's a shame. I think it's taken away from the game.
Well, who's the ref? McCauley. McCauley came out and tweeted that call was completely wrong.
Yes, I saw that. So now you have other referees coming out saying, disagreeing with each other on this. I think that they've got it. I've been through this with college where they have these. The Big 12 has a meeting every offseason with their referees where they kind of get on the same page with interpretation of rules. I got to believe the NFL does the same thing. And it just seems like different crews are calling things differently. And, for players, they can't develop any kind of consistency on what's expected of them.
That's a big play there. That's a big play. They get the sack. Instead, they end up scoring a touchdown because that keeps that drive going. They get the sack, would have made it, 3rd and long? If they end up, making
it would have made it 3rd and – yeah, it would have made it like 3rd and 13 or something like that from the 32 or 33. And the way that Dan Bailey was kicking, that's not a gimme field goal.
Right. I mean, the worst case scenario, they get 3 out of it. Instead, that extends the drive. They get a touchdown. Yeah, that's a 4-point swing. The Eagles lose by 2. That's a big play in the game.
It is an absolutely big play in the game. And it just felt like it's one of those plays that I think you look at a team right now that's struggling, that's 2-3, and you go, what next? How else are we going to get snake bit? Because I think right now they're kind of looking for something to go their way, the ball to bounce their way, and it's just not. And that's another play that went against them.
All right, Scott Grayson's got full grades at 973ESPN.com, full locker room interviews, video you can see from inside the locker room. Check it out right now at 973ESPN.com. Thanks, Scott.
All right, thank you, Mike.